This year, my medical team and I have discovered a lot more new diagnoses for myself, and one of them happens to be autism as well as a sensory processing disorder. And I was actually officially diagnosed with this back in July at Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville, and I waited to come out with this diagnosis, I guess, several months later, just because I wanted to wait to make sure everyone important in my life heard the news from me and not from social media. So instead of me posting it on social media and then having the important people in my life find out that way, I wanted to make sure I had the time to tell them myself at the right moment. And now that everyone close to me knows, I can come out with my diagnosis and start spreading awareness about autism and sharing my story with it, because autism is definitely not what I thought it was before I was diagnosed. So here we go. So I'm not ashamed of being autistic in any way whatsoever. It's just the way God made me and part of who I am. Yes, I have always been autistic, and yes, it's usually diagnosed in childhood. However, my doctors have given me two reasons for why it was overlooked when I was younger. One, I'm very high functioning, and there wasn't as much known about autism back then as there is now. Two, I've always maintained straight A's throughout schooling. And since I never struggled academically, there wasn't really any reason to look into a developmental disorder. So that's why it was overlooked when I was younger. However, as I grew older, the mistakes and issues I made because of my autism became more apparent. As a kid, the issues I had for my autism could be attributed to immaturity. But as I grew older, the mistakes I made became less appropriate for my age. So it's not that I was getting worse, it was just that my issues became less appropriate for my age, and therefore they became more apparent. As the past few years, a lot of what I heard was, you need to stop doing that, you're getting too old to do that, you need to grow out of that. So that is when I realized there's really got to be something wrong here, because I'm struggling a lot with things that come so naturally for others. So I thought it was part of my neurological disorders. So I went to my neurologist and I asked her for some help, gave her my symptoms, and she said, "It seems like you might have autism." And at that moment, Judd and I looked at each other, and it made a little bit of sense. So anyways, she referred us to a local neuropsychologist in Tampa Bay, where I live. He evaluated me with a consultation, and after, before we could even get the word autism out, he spoke with us, just wanted to get to know me. And he said, "Has anyone ever told you you're probably autistic?" And Judd and I looked at each other and we just laughed. He wouldn't confirm the diagnosis just there because he wanted to wait and see what Mayo Clinic was going to say after they conducted neuropsych testing, which was happening the next week after I saw that neuropsych in Tampa Bay. So I went to Mayo Clinic. I was originally being tested for memory impairments, but I asked them to add in the component for autism, and they did. I spoke with the psych for 2 hours. I had 4.5 hours of neuropsych testing, which is cognitive mind games and role-playing, and at the end of it, they concluded that I have high-functioning autism, a sensory processing disorder, and moderate to severe memory impairments. So that is how I got my diagnosis in my adult age, and now I will go on to explain how it affects me. So y'all may have heard that autism is a spectrum disorder, and that means that it affects everybody in a wide variety of ways. I am very high functioning. If you met me on the street, you probably wouldn't even know that I'm autistic, but I definitely am, and it affects me in a variety of ways. One of which is that I struggle to maintain eye contact. It's especially difficult for me to do so with people I've just met. I can make eye contact just fine with Judd because I know him well, but even close family members and friends, I still struggle with it. Another issue I have is that I come off too blunt and straightforward. I cannot predict how my words are going to affect others, and my mind is just very logical, so I say exactly what I'm feeling and exactly what I think. So I'm not intentionally trying to be rude or offensive, but that's how I often come off. My friends have come to realize that, oh, it's just Jackie, that's what they say, it's just Jackie. She's not intentionally being rude, it's just, she's literal, that's what she thinks. I'm often compared to Spock, so I'm trying to learn how not to be blunt, but it's very difficult for me. Another problem I have is that I'm terrible at reading other people's emotions. I can't tell if somebody else is happy or sad or excited or mad, and that's an issue because when I have my Jackie moments and I'm too blunt, even though I'm not intentionally being rude, other people will become offended and I have no idea that I've offended them unless they specifically tell me, you have offended me. I won't know. And that's because I can't register other people's emotions because I cannot read facial expressions or body language. And that's just completely out of my league. I am not good at it, but I'm working on it. I'm also bad with spatial awareness. I'm often too close to people I don't even know sometimes, or too far away. I'm also not spatially aware in parking lots, which has been dangerous because I'll walk straight out into traffic and I've almost been hit several times. That's very dangerous. Yes, I'm working on it. I'm also very strict about certain things, and I'm trying to become more flexible, but it's hard. Things must be done a certain way, and there's other things that have hindered me, like I have to have my spot at the dining room table, and if I don't, I freak. Like, this is my spot on the couch, and if I can't sit here, I freak. I won't even go in the living room to sit. It has to be there. And I know that doesn't make sense, but that's how it is in my mind. Yes, I'm working on it. I also have extreme fears because of the autism that don't make any sense, but to me, it's just overwhelming doom. I have a fear of wasps and needles. Yeah, I access myself now, so that fear is pretty much done. I still hate needles, but it's a thing. I'm also terrified of oranges, and I know that's ridiculous, but in the next section I'll explain why, and it'll make more sense, hopefully. I'm also not great with sarcasms and sayings. I am very literal. So sarcasm and sayings don't go well for me. For example, I was at a doctor's appointment and they asked, where do you live? And I said, oh, I live here. They said, oh, that's quite a hike. And I said, no, we drove here. So just things like that, just it doesn't make sense to me. It's pretty much just a social aspect. Honestly, sometimes I feel like everybody is just doing everything so flawlessly and effortlessly, and I'm trying so hard and getting nowhere. But now that I know my problem, I am actively working on it with occupational therapy, and I'm waitlisted for behavioral therapy, and I know I'm gonna get better. Some days are hard, but I can do it. So now that I've gone over just some of my specific struggles with autism, I'd like to go over some of my strengths, because there are a lot of positive aspects to being autistic. You know, I don't see it as a chronic illness that needs to be treated, but rather it's just a part of who I am that could use a little guidance. One of my best friends describes it as me being from another planet and she has to teach me how humans function, and I think that's a pretty good description. So like I said, there are a lot of positive aspects to being autistic. For example, we are great at problem solving. Studies have shown that autistics can problem solve 40% faster than neurotypicals, which are people without autism. I'm also very creative because of my autism, and that's been a big role in my entire life. I love my creativity. Whatever I lack in common sense, which is kind of a lot, I definitely make up for in book smarts, which is important to me because I like to perform well academically. I'm also very logical. I don't let my emotions get in the way of important decisions, which may not always be good, but it usually works out for the better. I'm also very resilient. People's intentionally harsh and rude words just don't affect me. I don't offend easily, and people can't get me down. My logical thinking tells me, why would what somebody else has to say have any effect on my life? I'm just going to keep doing me. So yeah, I don't offend easily. You can't really get me down if you're trying to be mean, so I like my resilience. I'm also very tenacious and stubborn, which isn't always a good thing, but it allows me to be very determined in everything that I do, including my battle against all of my chronic illnesses. So you see, my brain is just wired differently, and I see the world in a very unique way, and I think that's going to give me lots of opportunities in life. If I had the ability to take away my autism, I would not do it. Like I said, it's a part of who I am, and God made me this way for a reason. So I like being me, and that means I like being autistic. So now that I've gone over just some of my strengths and just some of my weaknesses, because there's no way I could cover all of it. It's a part of my life, so it affects everything. Now I'd like to go over my sensory processing disorder. So sensory processing disorders often go with autism, and it's basically when external stimuli comes into the brain, it can't be processed appropriately in response to the environment. It can be very overwhelming, and it's termed sensory overload. I have my biggest issue with sound, but I also struggle with sight, taste, and touch. My level of sensory overload will begin with confusion and disorientation. Sometimes I'll freeze up, but I just become very confused and disoriented. Then I'll move on to becoming anxious, and it'll end with a complete meltdown, which doesn't happen very often at all. And I'm not typically anxious. I don't struggle with anxiety pretty much whatsoever. It's mainly the confused and disoriented feeling from the sensory overload that really impedes me. So something that I've found that helps me a lot is headphones, noise canceling headphones that I got from Bass Pro Shop. And I have to use them in restaurants, but we typically avoid dinner time because it's too noisy for me. I use them at Disney, I use it when it's thundering, I use it when the vacuum is running, and it really helps. It doesn't always correct everything, but the headphones do help me, and I've been using them for years, even before my diagnosis, because it's just so draining and overwhelming to have too much sound. My brain just can't process it. One issue I have for my sensory processing disorder is going to grocery stores. I cannot go alone because I just become overwhelmed in there with all of the sights of the products. There's too many colors, there's too many smells, and the noises going on in there. And so what happens is, like I said, I become disoriented and confused, and I will go around and around, and I have lost hours just being in that state in a store until an employee finally helped me. So I can't go by myself. Judd has to go with me, but we're working on it so I can go independently. I also have a big issue with oranges, and I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's fruit like that, lemons, grapefruit. If the inside of one touches me, that I cannot handle. I'm thinking about it right now. I just can't process that sensation, and it will instantly trigger a meltdown. I haven't touched the inside of one in years, so you can tell how extreme it is. And I know that might sound ridiculous to you. This girl has a fear of oranges because of a sensory processing disorder. Yeah, it can be that serious. I know that sounds crazy, but I'm just here being honest about my autism and sensory processing disorder. I'm sure if you have an SPD and you're watching, you can relate to me and you know exactly what I'm talking about. So that is my issues with my sensory processing disorder. I am limited to some things I can do, but I'm working on it. So let me tell you about my treatment for my autism and my sensory processing disorder. So I've been going to occupational therapy for a few months now, and I love my OT. She's great. What's funny is I actually want to become an occupational therapist, and this was decided about 2 years ago before I even knew I was autistic. So this experience has been great for me for a few reasons. In occupational therapy, we're working on giving me coping mechanisms and ways to work through my sensory processing disorder. We also focus a little bit on my social issues. Like the last appointment, we worked on recognizing certain facial expressions, and I always have a lot of fun with my OT. At the same facility where I do my OT, I'm on a wait list for behavioral therapy that will focus on my social issues in relation to my autism. So with those two things, I think I'm going to gain a lot of progress, which is great. We're also working on how to incorporate Harlow into my autism management. She helps me so much with my other chronic illnesses that it would be great to have her help with this. I don't consider autism a chronic illness. It's just part of who I am. So anyways, what I'm doing right now is I'm having her learn a command to where she'll lean her weight against me. So I can use that to kind of ground myself when I start becoming overwhelmed by sensory overload. She also has a pull strap on her vest, which I grab onto when I become a little disoriented, and I'm also going to have her do deep pressure therapy, which she already does for my pain when I become really overwhelmed. I'll sit on the ground and have her lay on me and distribute her weight and body heat in a way that I prefer to help ground me and let me focus on her rather than all of the overwhelming stimuli. So that's what I'm doing right now. It's been working so far. Progress is kind of hard to see instantly, but I'm determined to work at it. Having a diagnosis of autism and sensory processing disorder has been relieving, to say the least. I knew there was something different about me, and now that I know what it is, we can focus on treating it. And it's been really good so far. I'm glad you watched this video. Hopefully it's taught you a little something. Autism isn't really what most people think it to be. So hopefully you learned something. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm really happy that people know I have autism now. Like I said, I'm not ashamed of the diagnosis. I just wanted to wait until all the important people in my life knew about it before putting it on social media. So now I'm ready to let the world know and spread awareness about autism. So thanks again for watching. Let me know if you have any questions, and I hope you enjoyed it.